We're gonna start picking her up.
I'm trying to think of who else we have.
Hillary.
Hillary is not here tonight.
Oh.
Email us.
Okay,
Oh, we have a.
Okay, you're live.
all right, thank you, Jason.
I remember who. I'm losing track of who we lose. That was the other one.
All right, should have emailed me.
Oh, well, Jason Riffenbark.
Was that the last
All
one?
right, well, we have a quorum.
Well, before
so-
Jeff.
Oh, right.
All right,
So Jeff
call the
left,
meeting
Jason
order.
left.
And first on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Join us for that. Flag is in the corner.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. First up is approval of the minutes of May 17th, 2021 and June 8th of 2021. I have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Jay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Earl. Is there any corrections, deletions, or otherwise discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes? All right, thank you. Unanimous. All right. Next up is approving the roll of accounts dated May 27th, 2021, in the amount of $344,357.61, and dated June 10th, 2021, in the amount of $125,100.29.
Move to approve the rolls listed.
Second.
We have a second from me. All right. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the rolls as presented? It's unanimous. Thank you. Report of committees.
I have adult education.
Yes.
Adult education held an advisory meeting on the 14th of June. For the year ending, the graduation ceremony was on the 16th. They put 189 students through. Of those 189, 120 actually met the 12 hours that they were required to attend to be counted within the system. So that's roughly 2/3, which was great. 64 were post-tested in CASAS, which is the database that they use to measure academic growth. And out of those 64, 54 showed demonstrable gains where they jumped up like a full quintile. So that was awesome. They had 27 total grads at the graduation ceremony. 14 identified as female, 13 as male. 4 of the grads were from Winslow. So we put 4 people through that 27 total grads. The age breakdown, 13 of their students are in the 16 to 20 age range, 11 students in the 21 to 30 age range. So that's 24 out of the 27. So that's their demographic. Although they did have 2 people, 31 to 40, and 1 person, 51 to 60. So that was heartening, very, very heartening. Excuse me for going off my phone here, but they are planning a pilot course that's going to be offered in the fall of 2021. It is a school to work course. It's going to be an integrated education and training opportunity. They're putting a person through the credentialing process now to actually run that, facilitate the course. The objective is to find entry-level employment or internship opportunities for diploma learners. They're going to be doing 2 days a week for 15 weeks. 8 weeks of that is pre-employment work, and then the next 7 will actually be the internship or the working. They're limiting to 4 students a class because it's going to be very intensive hands-on. So that's going to start this fall. If it is successful in the fall, the intent is to increase the number of classes in the spring, not to increase the number within a class, but to increase the number of classes. This year, they moved, because of COVID, they moved from all physical to a digital platform. So they had a number of computer learning opportunities, and Hannah feels very confident moving forward that the program is going to continue to grow.
So those numbers that you were talking about, how is that year over year? Is that an increase in?
It actually is roughly the same.
Okay.
So she didn't get it. She said there was no demonstrable drop off from 2021, 1920, 2021 with COVID. They just had to do some things differently. Like they moved some courses into the summer, and they ran courses over the summer, and people were able to attend those. A lot of switching to the digital platform, and people attending virtually. So Hannah was very happy. She was definitely happy with the amount of students showing that measurable gain, because that's a quantifiable metric that she can use for the program.
Very good. Do we have any other committee reports? Okay. Public comments up next on the agenda. We have typically been moving that to the end of the agenda. So those have been online. But if we had any public comment of anybody here, I guess we'd entertain that now for either that.
I do have some comments. Mr.
Okay.
Selwood, please?
Yes.
If you don't mind.
Yep, go right ahead. We do kind of limit the time to something reasonable, so
Yeah.
how long do you think you have?
It should be just a few minutes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
My name is Scott Fortuna. I'm a parent of a child that may be attending Winslow Public Schools next year, 7th grader. And I believe that no child should be forced to wear a mask, ever, anywhere. I believe they're suffering psychologically by being forced to cover their face with a sense of guilt that they make somebody else sick, a sense of fear that they could get sick themselves, possibly die, that they're vessels of disease. I believe that's what they feel when they're forced to cover their face. And that's just not the case. The data does not support that. There's a network of 14 states that report into the CDC specific data. And in that reporting network makes up about 10% of the US population, or 32 million people. And of the hospitalizations recorded by those 14 states, less than 1% are kids. Half are 65 years or older. Less than 1% are kids. There are 42 studies conducted around the world of children that tested positive for COVID-19. Those 42 studies were analyzed 275,000 children that had tested positive for COVID-19, more kids than are in this whole state. 0.2% were seriously affected by the disease. That means 99.8% of generally healthy kids that were COVID positive were not seriously affected, didn't get sick. Leaders that focus on the 0.2% at the expense of the 99.8% are not leaders for very long, in my experience. Comparing it to the flu, COVID weekly hospitalization rate in the US peaked on January 9th of this year at 1.4 per 100,000 kids. Flu was 4 per 100,000 kids. The last time flu had any significance, which was 2019-2020. Somehow miraculously, COVID-19 wiped out the flu last year. But in 2019-2020, 4 kids per 100,000 were hospitalized with the flu. COVID, 1.4. The flu is almost 3 times more likely to hospitalize a child than COVID? Did we ever consider mandating masks for the flu? Nobody ever thought that that should be done. Flu is 3 times more likely to hospitalize a kid than COVID. So if kids don't get sick from the virus, why are we making them wear masks? Occasionally you hear about this thing called asymptomatic spread. Asymptomatic is another word for healthy. You're walking around without symptoms. You feel good. You don't think of yourself as being sick. Dr. Maria Van Kerkhove is the head of the World Health Organization's Emerging Diseases Unit. She said asymptomatic spread was very rare. That's a quote. The CDC published a study, quote, little to no transmission occurred from asymptomatic case patients, unquote. There's links to all this in the hard copies. If you'd like an electronic copy, my email address is in there. I'd be happy to send it to you. It's the greatest trick ever played on a society to make people think that they could be sick when they feel fine. Kids don't need protection from COVID-19. Kids don't need to protect other kids from COVID-19. So who are they protecting by wearing a mask? Us, the adults? Since when do we use children as human shields to protect us? We're supposed to be protecting our children. There was a randomized controlled trial, a scientific experiment conducted in Denmark, the only one of its kind that I'm aware of, on the efficacy of masks. The trial is designed to remove any implicit bias. So no matter how you feel about an issue one way or the other, the trial doesn't care. It's a scientific experiment, not observational. It's the only one that's been done for COVID that I'm aware of. I'd love to see others if you know of them. The conclusion
Can
was
I
mask.
interrupt you just for a second? How much more have you got? Because it's been more than a few.
2 slides. I have 2 slides.
Okay.
Their conclusion was masks did not reduce the infection rate among wearers. The virus is aerosolized like smoke. A mask is not going to stop smoke from getting into your lungs. The virus is floating around in the air like smoke. And your mask can't stop smoke. Masks don't work against this virus or any respiratory virus. Harms. They block emotionally signaling between teacher and learner, teacher and student, mother and son, father and daughter. They block emotional signaling. They impair verbal and nonverbal communication. They impair facial recognition and face identification. Do you think it's important for a 4 or 5-year-old kid to be able to recognize their parent across the room or across the parking lot? I'd say that's pretty important. They impair facial recognition and face identification. Pressure by its straps create headaches and other discomforts. Bacteria, other pathogens can accumulate on masks. We need to get masks off our kids. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your information. Are those copies for us?
Yes.
Okay. Next on the agenda is administrators' reports. Oh,
There's not many.
we start with Mary. Mary's closest to us.
Oh, I'll hold off until we do curriculum.
Okay, very good. How about Mr. Bell?
I'm not, no, I'm just kidding.
Nobody wants to go.
Mary can say that because it's her last one.
Oh,
She can
right.
she can just push it off. And then if it doesn't come to it. Really quick, a couple of updates. Want to tell you our last student of the month for June was Dom Dagnall. Dom is a sophomore, and you know it's always great, obviously, when students get student of the month, but when somebody who is an underclassman gets recognized by the teacher as somebody who is a standout leader in our school, there's a lot to be proud of. So Dom is a fantastic student representative in a lot of ways. So graduation went off beautifully. And I can take credit for it, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes, and I'm going to try to remember everybody. But from the secretaries, Jane, Giselle, Barb, Beth, what the four of them did to pull off class night, when some of you may not know, class night was supposed to be in the gym. Well, that morning of class night, Rick and I at 6:30 in the morning are pounding in stakes in the ground with the picture of the senior and their diploma. 6:30, sweat is pouring down. I looked at Rick and I said, there's no way we can have graduation inside. We're gonna seriously, there's no way. Let's see what we can do to get it outside. And that day, the amount of effort that went in, and I can't take the credit because I didn't do a lot of that legwork. Charlie, Mark, Beth, Charlie, our grounds and maintenance guy, with Mark Vesey, the two of them were just unreal that entire week. From setting up for class night to setting up for graduation. That field looked absolutely gorgeous. Parks and Rec, making sure that the field was not only mowed on Monday, but made sure that trimming happened, that the field looked absolutely phenomenal. Jim coming in and making sure that 2021 was on the scoreboard.
That was awesome.
I know I'm probably forgetting 100 people that I should be thanking, but there's a lot of people behind the scenes that make me look good. And I try to do a really good job of making myself look bad. So thankfully I have all those people making me look good. So, and I hope for the parents and for the students, they felt like it was special. You know, that was the goal. And, you know, I told a lot of the seniors, oh, don't worry about graduate. We will make sure it's special for you guys. And I hope that the families and everybody felt that way. So
It's good of you to have a nice day. That was well organized.
I will say the stress I had going into graduation was the weather, and it was perfect.
But it held up,
Absolutely perfect.
Great.
Yeah.
Slight breeze, beautiful.
And it only took about 6 hours for me to get the first email about next year, wondering if we can do the same thing. So to be determined.
Not
Good
quite
job.
the same. Not quite the same. We still have one thing to change.
A couple things.
Yeah,
But, no, it was great. It was probably the largest group I'd been in for over a year, so it was actually nice that everybody was able to that culminates at that point where everybody gets together with class day and graduation to bring people together, so that was nice.
And Thursday morning, we did have 2 more
Oh.
ceremonies, individual ceremonies for some kids who didn't want to be part of the larger thing. And seeing the look on those parents' faces made it worth going over there Saturday morning, or not Saturday,
I was
Thursday
going to
morning.
thank you on behalf of the alternative school for doing
Yeah.
that. That made a tremendous amount of difference, and that young man was talking about it.
You know, every once in a while, there are kids who don't want to do anything. They don't want to have a special ceremony, just come in and give me my diploma. And, you know, but to the families, I want to at least offer whatever, and seeing the smile on the parents. It's like, you know, those things that take this much time can have a huge impact on the family.
Great job.
Any questions before I run away?
Another year done.
Another year done. Ready for the next one.
thank you.
There you go.
Was it only one?
Yeah, it seemed like 4.
All right. I guess we'll go with Erica.
Keep it brief. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about something that we did the last week of school at Winslow Elementary. We did some opinion writing. And the topic of our opinion writing was, what was your favorite animal that came to school and why? Monday and Tuesday of the last week of school, we had Pony Express Zoo from right here in Winslow. They brought a tortoise, many adorable goats and baby goats, several alpacas, a miniature pony, and a miniature donkey. The students had a great time, and many told me, and their teachers and the animal owners who brought them, this is the best day ever, and this is so much fun. I want to share a few pieces of opinion writing that I got from some of our 4th graders. My favorite animal is a tortoise because it was calm and friendly. It was a calm and friendly animal. The tortoise was very interactive and it enjoyed the sun. I also thought its habits were cool. I was very impressed when I learned that it could go a year without water. I was also surprised when I learned it could burrow into the ground. I also liked the idea of having a shell. Another one. My favorite animal I got to see was the baby goats because they are so cute and tiny. I like when they run away from us and the bigger goats. They would run away from the bigger goats because they kept headbutting the baby goats, which was fun to watch. Of course it is. My favorite animal that I saw today was the turtle because it was very cute. Another reason I like the turtle is because it kept following us. It also looked like it was smiling. The shell was also really hard. And the last one. My favorite animal was the mini horse because I go to this barn a lot and get to see horses and ride them. And they also are my favorite animal. I love to watch the horse move around and play with the mini donkey. I also like the goats because they follow you around. Apparently that's the theme. Goats followed everybody. They also were soft and cute. It was fun to watch them play with the other goats and watch them roll around. So I'd also like to say that I'm proud of our students and staff, as when I was talking to the owners of these animals, they made a point to tell me that they go to a lot of schools in the area and that our students did a fabulous job and were super well behaved. They also commented on what a nice job our teachers did to facilitate students moving around the enclosures to visit and learn about the animals. I mean, I know how awesome our students and staff are because I get to spend every day with them, but I might be biased. It was great to hear from someone outside of our building how truly amazing they are.
Thank you. Very good. Thank you. All right. Well, while we're on the elementary school, Ms. Price.
So I have a little bit of a theme that will touch on that. I was prepared to share this at your last meeting, but I can kind of update. So May and the first part of June was a very busy month, especially in the world of assessments and substitutes. We talked a little bit about that. We did the developmental reading assessment for all grades, K through 5 during the month of May. We did the NWEA for grades 3 through 5, and we did the New Meridian Science Test for grade 5. The NWEA I found to be pretty efficient. It took about 45 minutes for each of the 2 tests, the math and the reading. That was also helped this year because of the one-to-one computing that we have. In years past, when we did it, we all had to go to the computer lab. We didn't have to do that. I'd like to thank the tech team for their readiness factor. And it was relatively easy to administer, both the NWEA and the New Meridian Science. We administered 243 students in grades 3, 4, and 5 took the NWEA. We had 3 students that only could take one of the 2 tests just because of the way things worked out and the inability to do makeups for those students. We had 83 students do the science test, and all who did it could. What I mean by that is we did have a little spot in there when we had 10 students who were in quarantine during the time that that was administered, and there wasn't any way for us to bring them in and be able to administer that test. But Erica was able to get the exemption from the state so that they weren't counted as non-participants, and that was a factor this year. I felt the students put forth an excellent effort just in terms of the feel of what was going on, and I commend them all. And I'd like to commend our staff and our parents for setting the tone, the testing conditions, the attitude and the culture that made it successful. It was really clear that everybody took this very seriously. And to kind of give an example, especially from the parental support, we had 19 grade 5 students who were remote. And you had to bring those students into the school to take the science test. The NWEA could be administered remotely, but the way the state had that one set up, you had to come to the school. We had 17 that came in and took that test, and they didn't really get a lot of notice, quite honestly, that we needed to have them come in. And we divided it up. We probably could have done it differently in retrospect, but we didn't know how long students were going to take for that. And they recommended that we do them in 3 separate 1-hour sessions for the 3 sessions. So they came in 3 days, 3 consecutive days. Parents brought them in, came in and picked them up. And I just think it was remarkable that we had that sort of a turnout for that. And I'd like to thank Michelle Blake. She was our district assessment coordinator because she really helped at behind the scenes set us up so that we knew what it was we needed to know without being overwhelmed, and we were able to pass that on to our teachers. And Michelle, Erica, Keith, and Andrea Bragdon, our new literacy specialists, will be meeting this summer to also do a little more work on digesting the data and figuring out what it is that we need to do when we work with our staff in the fall coming back. So it really turned out well. And again, our students were awesome, our teachers were awesome, and our support from our community was awesome. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. All right, Will.
Sure, an update on a few things. If you recall, during budget development, we talked about the new phone system. So that project is starting to spin up, and we're giving the spreadsheets of all of our existing extensions to them so they can program it. So anyway, just to let you know, we should have a new phone system in all schools in Winslow when we start the school next year. This phone system, along with doing the basic stuff like the phone on your desk that rings when you pick it up, has more, I would say, advanced functionality that actually allows you to have your extension also be an app on your phone, which gives us much more flexibility. But just a reminder that in the end, phone on the desk is what we were most needing, just that our existing phones on the desks were here before I started. Shelley could probably estimate the age of it, but we're talking 14-year-old handsets that are starting to fail. So it was time. So there's that project. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, which is we sort of have this every summer as we collect a lot of old stuff and we need to get rid of it. We do have our board policy DN, Delta November, and that basically says the school board is to be informed of any property declared surplus by the superintendent prior to its disposal. So this is our yearly thing before we call the computer recycling companies to take large bins of broken computers away. We need to inform you according to policy DN. So needless to say, for disposal, we have things like old printers, large printers that don't work anymore, various computers that have been taken apart for whatever spare parts could be used out of them. So a reasonably big pile of that. What's perhaps a little different this year is that we have a large portion of computers that we would like to actually, instead of send to a recycler, and the recyclers generally take things away at no cost. You might occasionally get a bill from them for things like batteries or other hazardous materials. Certain computers we would like to send to a computer reseller. And that's a company that comes in and takes your computers and gives you some residual value for them. Might only be $50 a device. But the reason we're trying to do this is, and this sort of ties into the MILTI program. Every 4 years, the MILTI program had refreshed devices for 7th and 8th grade students and their teachers. So that's been going on for the past decade and a half. Where we are now is due to what was going on at the state and transitions of people, they missed their deadlines. And the year that we just finished was their gap year, where they basically said, we hadn't figured out what we're doing with these, so our devices that normally got refreshed after 4 years went to a 5th year. And the Department of Ed has finally released what they're going to be doing with the MILTI program, which is they'll be covering the cost of our student devices, but only about half the cost of about 20 or so of our staff devices. And so that's going to leave us with an unbudgeted bill of about between $9,000 and $10,000. And so what we thought is, well, all of these MacBook Airs and Teacher Macs that are being cycled out after 5 years, if we can sell them for their residual value, I don't think we're going to get the full $9,000. But by giving it to the reseller, they'll evaluate them. They might give us $20, $40, whatever per device, but that'll get us more than 3/4 of the way to covering that gap. And so there's sort of an intent not just to recycle stuff, but to put stuff out to a reseller. And so we wanted the board to be informed of that intent.
How many are going?
How many?
How many devices?
I'd have to get the enrollment for grades 7 and 8. It's less than 200. So. Yeah.
We have 3 questions. First of all, on the phones, is there a process already set up for training? And how you train a couple people and they go off and train?
Right. So the company that's doing the phone system, needless to say, there are office personnel and staff that are working all summer. And so when they're here in 2 weeks to do the final whatever, they're going to give the training to the people that are here now. And then we'll do more training for the, because there's secretaries or other folks that come back only about 2 weeks before the start of school. It won't be that much different than we're going to do photocopier fleet. And we have to schedule trainings for office folks on those too. For the bulk of our users, it's phone rings, you pick it up and answer, you dial an extension, and it's really how do you get to your voicemail. So it's luckily for the heavy users, we'll have the actual company here to help with that training.
This might not tie to that, but it made me think of it. In an emergency situation, is it the phones or is it the video? Or is there something that's linked in our electronically from our school to the PD or you know, or to
I
some
don't think
emergency
we should
services?
discuss that in public session. I
Oh,
think that's
that-
a private,
That maybe, you
Non-public
may be
session.
right, Jay, but I just want to know is if the process is being looked into. How's that? If it's,
Well,
at least, that's a good point.
What I would say is, by law, statute, don't know the exact term, all modern phone systems being sold have to support something known as E911 or Enhanced 911. So any system we are getting has to follow basic safety protocols as far as calling emergency services and identifying the location that, you know, originated the call.
Well, would it be, and I'm going to ask another question that might, would our security footage, I noticed so many times how well that screen is broken down into all the different views in the office there. Is that something that can be patched in from the police? Can they?
I would prefer not to discuss that.
Okay,
in
same
public
kind of
session.
thing.
I mean, it's just my preference. The board can do whatever it wants.
I don't know, but I don't know if is that really a secret? That maybe that's not.
If there were a member in the audience or a person listening at home that had an interest in whether or not the police could access our video cameras, then I would not want to advertise that either yay or nay.
I totally agree with that, but there's also, on the other side, there's parents that worry about their kids' safety.
Well, those parents can contact me or contact us or contact Peter and ask those questions.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, so if they contact me, I'd be lost at this point, but I would just make assumptions that
Well, I think-
it's possible.
I'm guessing the short answer is that we do have protocols in place for contacting,
All applicable protocols.
there's serious protocols, I'm sure, and of course provided by law,
You
I'm
made a
sure.
good point, but so you can understand
for
why I'm
contact,
asking.
so, um,
We do have a board policy on video cameras in school. And some of those policies and procedures address certain aspects of law enforcement access to school cameras and recorders.
Okay.
Not the entirety of what you're asking, but there is a public policy, some of which addresses what you're asking.
The reason I brought it up is because I thought during this transition to new phones, it might be a time for us to be actively making sure that everything's set up right. Thank you.
That's all I have unless there are other questions.
So Milty, that's, we're gonna be all set for the fall for that?
We sure hope so. We have not yet, no schools have, for the devices we're going with, no schools, because they gave a menu of 6 choices, the devices we would prefer to go with. So basically not all 6 choices yet have had the contracts fully negotiated by the Department of Ed. So we have yet to receive a piece of paperwork that we can sign saying, here you go, please ship them, we understand we'll be billed this amount. We have not received that paperwork yet. It is, you know, we're a little anxious because we know the summer is going away quickly and we can't just receive them off a truck and hand them out. There's a certain amount of prep work. What's wonderful is we have an amazing tech team. And every time I think, I don't know if they can get this done, they get it done 2 days before I even ask the question. So I just hate that they have to go through that misery when things show up late, but they get it done.
Hopefully before Labor Day, right?
That's right.
Okay, any other questions for Will? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shelley?
I'm gonna be somewhat brief. Just check in with you before we start our summer. But as you know, this is the time we've started cleaning our buildings, tearing them apart, and getting them ready for fall. Tomorrow, we're gonna start moving the 6th graders from the junior high, from the old junior high to the elementary. They're very anxious, and I want them to have plenty of time to get into the building, get their room settled, and feel comfortable with the new year in the fall. So that was a priority for me, for Charlie, and also for the custodians at the elementary. They were wonderful. They got in the 6th grade wing, they've got it all ready for us. So tomorrow's the day we're gonna get them moved in so they can start getting settled. So I'm excited about that. We've got the old junior high set up for park and rec for the summer. We've got the junior high set up for daycare for the summer. We've worked a schedule with our custodian for early morning to get in there and do the bathrooms and take the trash and get that all out of there. But they're all settled in over there, they're happy, they started their first day today. Park and Rec is running from June 21st to the July 30th, and the daycare is running from the 21st until I believe it's right around August 13th. So, but they're all excited, they're happy, they're running full programs, they're anticipating about 160 kids over there this summer. And they'll be part of that summer feeding program, so that's exciting too. Charlie and I were working on sorting out all the furnishings that's been in storage since last year. So that's gonna be a puzzle that we're gonna have to pull the pieces apart, and fortunately, we told the staff prior to, mark your stuff. You don't just put a sticky note on it, but underneath the chair or the table, or take a Sharpie, put your name and room number so we know where it goes. Because it's gonna be a mystery to us if you don't. So that's gonna, start beginning to do that this week. The secretaries have been helpful getting us notice of which classroom is gonna need how many desks, how many chairs, how many tables. So that's gonna be a lot of work this summer, but we're excited. Charlie is starting to get ahead on some of the projects that we left uncompleted last year because we got sucked into all the COVID stuff that we had to take a priority and get things done. But we're feeling very good about where we are and how we're starting the summer. So we're excited. We're ready to get it done. What can I help you with, John?
Do you have a tentative, and the key word being tentative, date where you're gonna transfer the old junior high over to the town as far as responsible for maintenance / any kind of further expenses?
Well, no,
It all depends on,
there's
other
so many
situations.
variables there, obviously the maintenance side of things have been very limited. Unless it's a life or safety issue, I'm not doing any investing in that building. Matter of fact, today, I just talked with our electrician today because on the daycare side, they've got a real bad switch that's broke, light switch, it's broke, it's arcing. I've tagged it out of service, and the electrician's gonna go in first thing in the morning, change it out, and but that's it. Nothing more than that, just life and safety issues, keep the building safe, keep the children safe, and keep the staff safe. That's my priority.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Jim?
Hey, I will be brief. We concluded the spring season, which for all teams was very successful. It obviously concluded up the Brew with our team playing for a state championship. Here's a group of young ladies that had 4 wins in the regular season, and they won 4 games over a 10-day period to play for the state championship. And I will tell you, they won a lot of fans up there. People thought they were unbelievable. Just looking ahead, I kind of checked with all the coaches, the fall coaches, about what numbers look like. Everybody is up noticeably in the summer programs more than we had last fall, which is encouraging. Because, for example, in girls soccer, the end of the season was 15 players. I was afraid we were getting to the point, and she has over 25 signed up. Field hockey's got over 25 signed up. So I think we're going to see life get back to normal, the kids get engaged again, and I think that's exciting for the school.
Speaking of numbers, how many kids were on the softball team?
13.
13, and how many do you have to be on the field at once?
9.
Yeah, think about that.
I think we only had 2 subs the other day. 2 subs.
Two subs.
Absolutely. Their streak of winning,
Just, again,
absolutely
it was 2
incredible.
weeks, so it was great. I mean, it was fun. Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Well, having gone up to that game up in Brewer, the state game on Saturday, was, the observation I had was, Cape Elizabeth had probably 3 times the roster we had,
Oh.
but we had 3 times the fans.
We had a great student section.
It was awesome. Great to see. So I think that was the big standout thing that I saw. And to get there, given the hurdles they had and a small roster and and such, I think they did a tremendous job getting there, so they should be proud, and I'm sure, you know, it's a little hard after you take a tough loss, but, you know, they really accomplished a lot, and they should be proud of that.
And that reminds them, there'll be a new regional championship man for the gym in about a month. So they've got someone that'll be in the gym for a long time.
Yeah, they did a great job. So, Earl.
And fall sports, we're looking for a normal schedule as far as
Schedule's all
preseason.
finalized, we have schedules for everything, it's a normal schedule, it's not gonna be regionalized like it's been. We'll go back to playing our normal KBAC opponents.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. All right, we have Jennifer online. Got anything for us, Jennifer?
Good evening, yes. I just want to take a minute just to commend our special education staff for finishing the year strong this year. We had just one small but very important part of that is our IEP meetings. Overall, combining all three of the schools, we had over 600 IEP meetings this school year, as many of our students have multiple meetings throughout the school year. I'm looking forward to having Nicole Tibbetts join us next year full time, but I do want to thank Wendy Baker for helping us this year to help with the paperwork and the meetings, as well as all of the principals for joining me on many meetings, and the families I know appreciate that as well. I just want to congratulate, we had 12 graduating seniors, so I just wanted to congratulate them as well.
Excellent. Any questions for Jennifer? Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. Okay, I think that's everybody. Mary deferred until later, so, okay. Amanda.
Yes. As of Friday, 96.44% of our fiscal year has passed and 91.544% of the budget has been spent. We do have payroll that will be posted tomorrow. We're now doing roll of accounts every week while we finish up the year to pay end of year bills, close out POs, and encumbered items. Revenues still need some final calculations, so it's too early to give any final numbers right now on where we are in the budget and how we'll end, but we are confident we'll be in the black with a healthy amount rolling into our undesignated.
Nice. Good.
Nice. Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Peter, superintendent's report.
Yes, end of the year with staff. We met in the gym. If you want to watch it, there's a link. I believe that you can watch it. A little bit longer than usual. Felt as though we had a lot of people to thank this year, considering this year that we've had. So we began with recognizing those who were retiring. And then we thanked a lot of people during the course of that hour. And then we talked a little bit about moving forward into next year and what that is going to entail, which we're going to talk a little bit more about later in the agenda. So I'll keep it until then.
Okay.
The other thing is that we had an administrative leadership retreat just with the administrators last week. We wanted to talk about things such as, some managerial pieces, such as closing out the year, things such as evaluations, things such as available positions and advertising, just managerial pieces. But then we wanted to think ahead about the leadership retreat, which we'll have this summer. And that leadership retreat will be with the entire group, the FLT members, the leaders, the department chairs. I believe we set that for August 17th. That's usually a day-long retreat. And so we had conversations about, let's talk about learning loss. How are we going to address that? How are we going to approach that in each of your buildings? How does the 30-page paper that we sent out, the research on learning loss acceleration, that was handed out to all of the administrators to have a read and to talk about some of the most important variables in that article that we need to look at. We talked about social and emotional. How are we going to handle that in each of the buildings, and what does that look like? What types of things do we anticipate in the social and emotional area? We talked about revisiting initiatives that might have taken a back seat over the last, 12, 15 months. And what are those initiatives that we want to get back at? Things that have to deal with academic achievement and respectful and responsible goal. And so that kind of took a good portion of our time in the morning to have those conversations, which kind of gave people an opportunity to be thinking about the leadership retreat and some of the things that they want to gather, put together for data to come prepared for that meeting. The next thing that we did, and this is something that Joel brought to my attention, which is the freedom of access training. When you become a new board member, within the first so many days, you're supposed to go on, well, one way you can do it is to go online and take the freedom of access training. And after you've answered the questions online, you print certificate that you've done it, and then you give it to me, and then we put it on file. And looking through some of the files, it's come to my attention that we don't have some of those certificates on some of you. And it would be really great if some of you went online and did that and printed that information out and handed it to us that it's been done. I can send you the website, but it's right on the I believe it's on the DOE website.
I think it's DOE. I think Maine School Board Association
Yeah.
has a link to it.
Yeah.
I think it might have been into rock when I first was on the board. Chisel and
I'll pass this around for those of you who need it. And Joel, you can,
it's a joke. That's a joke.
We get it done and send you a PDF, that'll be fine.
yeah, that would be great.
But, yeah, I guess I'll just Peter brought that up. There was a Maine School Board regional meeting last week that I tuned in on, and you hear a little bit about what other schools have going on with them, and we have common issues and things like that we discussed. So it was interesting to hear and discuss that everybody has the same sort of issues, but it was you hear what different schools are doing and how they're looking at things and such. But it's been good. I've done a couple of them now, so they're trying to have them more regularly than they've had them in the past. And that's a good thing. Anyway.
And the last thing I had to bring to your attention was the technology policy DN, which Will already covered. So thank you, Will, for taking care of that, and just brought that to your attention, and we'll move forward. So that's all I have, Joel.
All righty. Very good. All right, old business. Update on the return to school plan.
Should be relatively quick because you've already heard the plan. And the plan, the last plan that you heard, you've heard a lot of plans. The last plan that you heard was not to use the old junior high building, to have everybody back in the buildings where they were planned on being. We talked about the additional staff that we would need in order for that to take place, the additional technology needs that we might require in order for that to happen. The majority of those, well, I think all of those positions, the majority of those positions were advertised last week, either as one-year positions or two-year positions, whatever that might be. The exception was the technology remote teacher. We had all talked about one person, and then we all said that we were going to check in with our parents and see what the need was going to be, because rather than have one per building, we might be able to get away with one person. I know that special education had a need for one person, so it would be one person in addition to their need. And so all of those pieces have been advertised, and we're just waiting to see what we're going to get for some inquiries on those positions. The other big thing that came about was after we had our conversation, I think there was another announcement about something that Mr. Fortuna was talking about this evening. So we had this conversation at the administrative team level last week as well. It's something that we obviously need to bring to you, the board. And that is the wearing of masks next year. What will that look like? I think the majority of school districts are looking at like a junior high school without masks. And the state is still, first of all, the state is saying that masks are no longer required. but they highly recommend it at the elementary level under the age of 12 because those students still aren't vaccinated. They still have a strong recommendation for that age group. We discussed the whole concept of pool testing and how that would help us with a mitigation strategy. So one of the things that we want to bring back to the board is, we monitor to see how things go this summer. Things continue to go the way that they're going. It looks good. We will have pool testing for our students and staff, which will be another mitigation strategy, which will, anybody who's participating in pool testing would not have to quarantine if they were a close contact or if they had been vaccinated. So that would help keep our elementary schools in school and the kids in school. Because we still will have close contacts, we'll still have COVID cases, I'm sure, and we will still have kids who would have to quarantine unless they participate in this strategy. So with that, at some point, we'll bring it back to this group and say, what about the elementary school and the elementary kids? Do they need to wear masks or not if we're doing the pool testing? That would be something that we need to have a discussion on. But in terms of the middle school, high school, I'm thinking right now is that we would not.
Would it be appropriate for us to do a survey of parents, or is that because, I don't know if the nurse already has done that, or?
No, I think you'd get mixed reviews. You would have some parents who are, who share Mr. Fortuna's response this evening. You would have others who are right on the opposite end saying that they're afraid and they want to make sure they do everything they can to protect their child. So you'd have it at both ends, John, because we get both of those types of responses from parents.
Right. I'm just saying data-wise, wouldn't we know more if we surveyed, or would it be a waste of time, or, I don't know.
We'd know the people that gave us responses to the survey, but that's not everybody.
There's no harm in a
percentage.
survey, but
Yeah.
it seems to me that if we were gonna do a survey, I would prefer to see it like in early August, because if we see no variants that come up that are particularly problematic for young people, that's one thing. If there is a variant that comes up that's starting to have a different effect on young people, then that might be another thing. So I would want to wait to survey until we get as much information about genetic mutation as possible. But I do think a survey could
It would
be
be
useful.
more accurate because people's emotion is affected. The further it goes, you're more likely to have people comfortable with the risk level. The more weeks that go on, some of the points that he made during his presentation are valid about the emotional, impact. And I think that I agree with you 100%. The further we get closer to September, the more likely it would be accurate as to someone's opinion in September.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking is such that any decision we make on the fall for elementary, to make it a later date is probably advised, given how much has changed in the past month. We got 2 months before we can get to the middle of August. A lot can change, good or bad. So I don't think we need to get the cart ahead of the horse right now. And we'll see where we are in August.
One thing we know right now that is true is we can always change things. It isn't like if we go into September with one policy and things get bad, we could change again. It isn't
Right.
It isn't like it's set in stone. You know what I mean?
Right. But I guess at this point, I don't think we need to venture too far down the road to even
Right now,
set a policy beyond what we've already discussed, because
anything could happen.
the kids aren't in the schools right now anyway. So let's wait and see how things go, because the case rates are down. Do they stay down? Does, other variants, who knows? But, so we'll take a little wait and see approach is what I'm thinking. And I see nodding going on,
Yeah.
so that seems to be the sense of the board on that, which we'll have plenty of opportunity between now and the beginning of the school year to.
Seems like we did take a vote when this first occurred about following the guidelines from the CDC, and I think that's the reason we're at where we are now, was that we didn't know enough information we basically said, okay, we're gonna follow their guidelines because we certainly want the safety of our children to be priority.
That's correct.
That's where we started off, and,
That's correct.
and,
We don't know what's gonna happen in the fall. You can make a lot of assumptions. I think you'll have some schools that choose the elementary schools because they can be vaccinated to wear a mask with no pool testing. I think you'll have other schools who say we choose to do the pool testing, and that might be the tipping point to say whether or not you need to wear a mask, depending on the amount of cases. So I think there are variables that we need to look at between now and then.
Very good. So, all right, that was just information, no action required at this point.
Correct.
All right. No other questions, we'll move on. We do need to take action on the second reading of the FY '22 Winslow Public Schools budget. We typically do that after the approval of the budget at the town level. And since that's what got approved, I assume that's what we're gonna approve, so. I guess the question is do we have a motion to approve the second reading of the Winslow School budget?
So moved. I mean, it passed with 120, what was it, 121 to 50?
Something like that. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, 2-1.
right, but I mean, when you think that there's 5,000 registered voters,
Yeah, it's a little sad.
you get
it's
170.
not just a little sad, it's very sad.
It's extremely
Second.
sad.
Second?
Can I, before you get a second, can we add in the amount of the 17,039,114.76?
Okay. Yes, so,
Yes, motion to approve the second reading of the school budget in the amount of $17,039,114.76.
very good. We'll be very specific.
Second.
We have a second from Jay. Any other discussion? All in favor of
Pretty
approving
amazing.
the
That's a discussion.
school budget as
Pretty amazing.
motion? All right. Thank you. Very good. Very good. All right. Next up is second reading of policy AC2, racial equity and inclusion. So this was
First, read along back, do the second read.
second reading.
And this is a new policy, correct?
It is.
It is. We had nothing.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve by Jay. We have a
Second.
second from Earl. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of approving policy AC2? It is unanimous. Very good.
How often a policy board meeting is gonna be?
A lot more than what you have.
Not on the list now?
Once a month.
Yeah, we'll probably get some catching up to do since this last year was a little rough. Or a lot rough.
A lot rough.
All right, next up is
Another call.
another policy, second reading of policy JLCB, immunization of students. This is a new policy given changes in state law.
Yes.
Required change because they changed their exemptions and so forth, and the policy complies with state law. So, do we have a motion to approve the second reading of policy JLCB?
So moved.
Moved by Earl. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from me. Do we have any comments, questions, otherwise? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the second reading of JLCB?
Second reading?
Second reading.
We have to have it in place before the start of school.
Yeah, I was just trying to remember when, I can't recall when it was. What was it?
The second reading?
The first.
The first reading? Last meeting.
May 17th.
It was?
last regular.
Getting old.
Okay, anyway, we're all getting there. So we do have motion second before we forget, because we're getting old. All in favor of the second reading of policy JLCB? It is unanimous. All right, new business. Snow removal and sanding bid by S.B. Martin. I assume Shelley's telling us about this?
Yes.
Well, we went out to bid for our snow removal. We've not put that out to bid since 2010 and 11. We've extended his contract, but it was time that, we needed to do that. So in May 21st and 22nd, we published in the Morning Sentinel asking for bids for the snow removal in Winslow. And we only had one person that submitted a bid, which even back in 2010, 11, we only had 3. So apparently people are not very hungry right now. And they're not as hungry as I thought they were going to be. But unfortunately, Steve Martin was the only bidder that bid for the snow removal. He's been working with the Winslow School Department since we first went to removing our own snow when the town decided that they weren't going to do that anymore. And that was back in 1990, 2000. Steve has held the same price from back in 2000 till this past winter. We have a scale that we go by, and it's for a 14 storm minimum, it was like 14,000. This is the old pricing, was $14,000, and the maximum would be $22,000. And then there was additional charges for loader, because as you know, we have to truck snow because we're limited for storage around the buildings. So there was separate pricing for the sanding and the loader and the truck. After our bids came in and we had the one sole bidder, which was Steve again, the pricing has pretty much doubled of what we paid in the past, which it wasn't unexpected by no means, for the kind of work and dedication that he has, committed to the school department here in Winslow. We've never had any issues with him. So the new pricing that's come in is, as I said, is a considerable amount more. I was a little nervous because I didn't bid, I didn't budget quite enough for that because I didn't. So the new base price comes in at $28,000. The maximum is $44,000. The sanding pricing has gone up $120. The loader pricing's gone up $25 an hour, and the trucking has gone up $15 an hour. But as we've always been very pleased with what he's done for us, he's here. He works well with maintenance, and I'm hoping that you'll accept his bid so we can continue our relationship with Steve Martin.
Shelley, one of the things that you brought to my attention was that the last time that you had gone out to bid, the second highest bidder at the time, or the second lowest bidder at the time, was at his prices that he's giving you currently. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I kind of have a tendency to keep everything. And so when the bid come in, at first I was like, holy cow, $28,000, okay. And then I looked back from 2010 and 11, and one of the highest bidders back then in 2010, 11 was like $28,000. And I was like, wow, if it hadn't have been back then for Steve holding that price, which he's held, that $14,000, he's held that price since 2000. And he's always done a good job. He's never hinted that, geez, you guys are getting a deal here. Well, we knew we were. But, in all fairness, I think to Steve And, you know, we needed to put this out to bid and re-examine that. But, yeah, back in 2000, it was, and even the loader costs, the trucking costs were all in comparison to what we're paying now. That was the next to the lowest price back then. So he's not off the mark by no means.
No, I would agree with, given some of the plowing contracts I've seen for other.
Yeah,
You knew I was gonna have a question, right?
I know you will, John, that's okay.
But my question is this, as compared to the budget, because I can't recall all the figures from an extensive budget, where are we dollar-wise compared to what we talked about the
Well,
budget?
I think when it all washes out, I may be probably around 10,000 short, maybe. But I'm going to really hold the line with him, and he does, he works well with us. And I think I'm gonna try to, because I'm gonna be in Winslow more, and I won't be in Waterville anymore. So I think I can really form a relationship with Public Works, and maybe they can help us keep the cost down on this by doing some, helping with the trucking and helping with the loader and things like that, because that's when the prices really get drove up. When I'm paying per truck, per loader, per hour, that's when the pricing really goes up, and that's when we get off track.
Yeah, if we can get the town to
I
haul
work with
snow on
Mr.
a
Bell,
school
he seems to
vacation.
be able to control the
There's no
weather.
snow and falling on the roads,
Right,
that could be great.
yeah, because there are times Public Works, they're looking for things to do.
Yeah.
Because, it's the season that, all they look at is snow removal and what they can do with snow. So, I'm hoping that I can work with Paul and he can help us out.
Sounds
Now-
good.
The 28,000 is the minimum.
They,
What is, just if you could walk me through we've got a 14 storm amount, but then we've got a maximum storm amount. What's that mean?
What if there are only 3 storms?
Correct.
right, and what that means is, the chance of us having just 3 storms are like slim to none.
Right.
So, but that guarantees him his money
Right.
also, because he's committing to us for a
For
whole
those
season.
service.
So the minimum amount that we're gonna pay him is primarily $28,000. That's the base amount. But at no time, based on snow plowing and removal, not removal, but snow plowing, it'll never go more than 44,000. But what's gonna drive the cost are the additions, when we get additional call-ins, say, and that's why I'm really insistent with building administrators. Do not make those calls. Call us, we'll manage it. Call me, call Charlie. We'll make that call if we feel we need additional sanding. Or that was the whole purpose last year when we bought the sander for Charlie, was so that we would get that off the table. That's one less charge for us. We plow, we sand for our buses. We do that. We won't hire Martin to do that. And then, the only other time is when we do trucking and loading. That's when it drives the prices up.
I would
That's when the
assume,
budget really takes a hit.
I would assume the 28,000 is kind of an opportunity cost, because he has got to have commitment to us so that he can't be committed to anyone else. So his opportunities are lost there, so he has to have a figure to cover that.
Pay for equipment, insurance, all those.
Right.
things, so.
Oh, yeah, his trucking, his truck purchases alone are like right off the charts. And, because just to go down, today I looked at a 1-ton with a plow on it, with a dump body on it, $60,000. That was used with like 25,000 miles on it. I'm thinking, man, 60 grand for a used truck,
Well,
25,000 miles.
You're talking-
Wow.
he's come through for us on other occasions too, an example of which is the bonfire. He's donated things when it came time
Yeah.
to get things set up and even take care afterwards. They've done
He
stuff
does.
afterwards that
He does.
he's always been there when we need him.
You're right, John, because, Steve Martin, he's a resident of Winslow. I'm a firm believer, give it back to the residents that support us.
Absolutely.
Always a firm believer of that. You know, I was kind of, in a sense, I was kind of sad that no other resident contractors, you know, because I've had inquiries from other contractors, you know, what about the plowing bid? What about the snow bid? And, hey, it's out there, guys, you know, we do put it out there, and we were 2 days in the Morning Sentinel. And still only, and you know, I run the same ad, the same 2 days for Vassaboro. Do you know how many bids I got out there?
Well, it also
And
might
Vassaboro has beat me up out there, you know.
that might be a commentary on the Morning Sentinel.
But,
That's
but I mean, it could
not
also
here,
be that
not
everybody,
not on us.
you know,
I
given,
just made it.
but given this day and age, you know, that, you know, everybody could be as busy as they can stand and they can't get the help and all the other things that affect their ability to take on additional contracts. So, and obviously we want somebody responsive, and Steve has been.
Yes.
And given, you know, I do a little plow myself, so I keep track of how many storms there are a year and things like that. And, you know, 14 is, I mean, the other thing, in I deal with it work and whatever too, I mean, when we think of 14 storms, you might not have 14 storms that are 6, 8, 10 inches, but you get a couple inches, you still gotta go out there and plow it off and sand it, because it's a school, people are wandering around and no one falling down. So in our own driveways, we might not bother for that, we'll just drive it in and out, but in school, you can't do that.
You're absolutely right.
You gotta be
Joe.
there, so.
You know, the expectation from the school department is a lot higher
Yeah.
than what it is in our own homes. So, you know, in order to keep, you know, the staff safe and the kids safe and everybody safe, you know, get the buses in here safely, you know, we are at a different level of expectation, so.
Agreed.
Just one other question. As far as budgeting, how does this get paid? Is this an encumbrance that's paid all at once, or do we wait until the spring, or how does that work?
We do a billing, he does a billing, you know, what happens is I start with the season out with an open purchase order.
Yep.
And then he invoices as we go through the
Against the
season.
purchase
And
order?
usually he'll do like a 3 to 5 requisition invoicing, depending on, you know, you can, once you get to January, February, you can almost see how the rest of the season's gonna play out, you know, so, and believe me, we don't just write a check and say, here you go. You know, we make sure that he gets what he deserves and he's earned, and then we get, you know, the work that we're entitled to, and that's what we should have. Anything else?
I think we're good. So I think at this point, we just need a motion to approve the snow removal and sanding bid.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah, we have a second by Nate. All right. Any other questions, discussion, or otherwise? All in favor of approving the plowing bid for Steve Martin? It is unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you, John.
It's not gonna snow this winter anyway.
No, not at all.
All right. Very good. So next up is a new course proposal of quantitative reasoning, and I assume this is where we'll hear from there?
One last hurrah.
Next to Lester.
Oh.
So. So I was reading the new course proposal this afternoon, and I had a couple of questions on it regarding the course proposal, and it's one of those pieces that I'd like to bring back and just have a further conversation regarding this course proposal. Number one, I think it's outstanding. I think it's great. I think we need to do this. All of those pieces. The piece that I asked about, and I think this is where we need to get just the math department and the guidance department just back together to answer my question, because it's my question, it's nobody else's question. And that is, the requirements. So if you look on the first page, it says KVCC is changing their requirements and pathways for their programs. Quantitative reasoning is required 17 programs where college algebra has been reduced to 2 programs. In other words, you only need to take college algebra for 2 of their programs. The other 17 programs you do not. So then if you flip the back side of this sheet of paper, it says juniors and seniors who have already completed Algebra 2 and plan on going on to college in the following programs: business administration, accounting and management, marketing, culinary arts, early childhood education, emergency medical services, et cetera, et cetera. So my question was, if you have a Winslow student right now, and I just picked early childhood education as one example, if they plan on going to KVCC for early childhood education, are all of them completing Algebra 2 before being accepted at KVCC to go into that program? If the answer to that is yes, then we may have another situation that we might want to look at. If the answer to that is no, then why would we make it difficult for a student to take this course? Why wouldn't the student be able to take this course, let's say, as their third math course, even though it doesn't count for a full math credit because it's only a semester course? I get that. But what if they don't take Algebra 2 as their third course? And that's the conversation I want to have, because I don't know what their options are. So if they start off with Algebra 1, can they start off with pre-algebra? Can that be the first class that they take in high school? Is Algebra 1 the first class that they take in high school? But if you had somebody who went pre-algebra geometry, what's the third course? Is it a 3-year requirement? Is it a 3 math course requirement?
There is a three.
There is. So it was more of a question of, are we making it so difficult for somebody not to be able to get college credit who's going to KVCC, because that's the student we really want to help to get some college credit so that reduces the cost. So it's a question, and I don't know the answer, and maybe the answer is very clear and I don't have it, but it's a question because I'm looking at it from a student standpoint, not from a how many courses do you need to take standpoint, or are we preparing the kids, will the kids be prepared, not be prepared, et cetera, et cetera. I happen to have somebody who lives at home with me who works with KVCC and has put 40 kids into this course from the high school that she's worked with. None of them have had Algebra 2 as a prerequisite. So it's not a prerequisite of the school, it's a prerequisite of ours. So my question is, maybe it's the way that we go, but it's worth a conversation in my mind, because it's not going to make a difference next year because there's no one signed up in the fall. Signed after the second semester, so we've got time to bring this back to the board and just flush it out and have that conversation. So it's me, put it on me, putting the brakes on this a little bit just so we have further conversation.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I don't know, anybody wanted to touch on a little bit more about what this course is, just give everybody a little precursor, or do we want to save that until August or whenever we can get back to
Just briefly, I think the quantitative reasoning course is much more data analysis and statistics. And I think when you look at what even at the K-12 Common Core standards are, there's been a shift away from solely a traditional algebra, geometry, algebra 2 sequence, and they really want to make clear that for many of us, the work that we do is much more pertinent to the statistics, data analysis side of things than it would be to the algebra, geometry, calculus side of things. So that has already been reflected in our curriculum in K-12, and I think this just kind of parallels that. It is a concurrent enrollment course, which means that a syllabus will be KVCC, and the students will be able to get Winslow credit for it as well as KVCC. I think the discussion, as Peter lays out, that that I think the rationale for why that had been, at least from what we've heard from guidance, is that they also want to make sure that the students have sufficient math knowledge to be successful in this college course. So that's really the tipping point of the discussion. We certainly want to make it accessible to them, and we want to make sure that they can be successful. And so Peter's probably got a little bit of evidence right there that would suggest that maybe they could be successful without having. But those would be the discussions that we, this just came up. Never a dull moment on the curriculum front. Came up this afternoon.
Can this be done as an elective, or is this part of the?
No, it's an elective.
It's elective. I mean, I think in the discussion that we had at the committee level, I mean, I think the explanation as it stood out to me was this is math for non-STEM majors. I mean, for STEM, if you're going in STEM, you need the algebra, you need the calculus, you need geometry, trig, all those sorts of things, whatever. But for those who aren't in the STEM majors, I mean, this is the analysis of data and so forth fits pretty much everybody else has that need. This is where that is focusing. I thought it was a great way of kind of explaining what that is, so.
Move to table?
Second.
Okay. I don't believe we need to vote. We just need a motion and a second, I believe, to table. Is that correct? I think that's correct. We don't have that often, so. All right, very good. That will be tabled and we will get that on a later date.
Better table.
Thank you, Mary. So I guess now, K-5 science.
Now it
curriculum.
really is the last hurrah.
It really is. So what's kind of good about this is it's just sort of another, I think, another indication that we're sort of starting to head in the direction of a return to normal. We haven't talked about curriculum for a year and a half or more. But this was something, the K-5 science curriculum is something that was in the pipeline before COVID. As you know, we have worked through different subject areas in terms of curriculum at the elementary school because it's all the same teachers who are teaching those subjects. So we really had to sort of come up with a sequenced plan. When we got to science, there was also the complicating factor that the standards were changing, just as the ELA and the math standards changed with the Common Core. There was a national initiative to revise science standards, and states could choose to adopt those science standards. They're called the next generation science standards. They referred to as the NGSS. So we really timed our work on science curriculum waiting for Maine to adopt. Maine kind of held it up for a little while, so we were held up for a little while. But they did adopt these standards. They have significant differences from the old Maine learning results. One thing that's very different is that they're set up with a different structure. In the old Maine learning results, what you had was grade bands, and as long as you covered the material at some point in a 3-grade span, how you organized it was really up to a local district to determine. And with these new next generation science standards, they have assigned topics at each grade level. So on the one hand, that seems a little bit more proscriptive, but on the flip side, it makes it a lot easier to negotiate with teachers about what's going to be taught, because different teachers have their, their favorite kinds of things. It makes it much easier to provide resources that are appropriate for the grade levels. The NGSS standards also differ from the old Maine learning results in the way they organize the strands of science. In the old science standards, you had physical science and you had life science. And in these new standards, they've organized them so that there's physical science, life science, and then a separate strand for earth and space science. And then additional attention being paid to engineering and design. And Maine had already kind of had that, but it was just organized in a little bit of a different framework. So this was, it's not necessarily all new content, but definitely a new structure. And it meant that for teachers, they might be teaching topics that they had never taught before because it was out of the grade band. It was in somebody else's portfolio and not second grades. It might have been third grade. So that meant that the resources that they already had were not really sufficient. And so one of the things that we did was we did a lot of work with the teachers to sort of explain to them how and demonstrate to them how these new standards were different in the structure, but also in the approach. So one of the things about these next generation science standards is that instead of sort of telling students about science, they really want to get students' curiosity leading the way. And so what they really focus on is starting with things that kids can observe in the world around them or that they are familiar with. And they start with those questions and they kind of build from there. So this was very different. Teachers had a full day of professional development that Michelle and a consultant from Maine Math and Science put together. And I think the teachers were very excited about it. They took a look at the standards. We then shared with them a menu of options for resources. And it was organized basically kind of like your TripAdvisor restaurant. What's going to be the most expensive and the most comprehensive? What might be some kind of mid-range packages? What would it look like if we did it ourselves and put it all together ourselves? So we shared with teachers these resources, let them examine them, let them talk about the pros and cons and so forth. And the strong consensus was to go with a program called Mystery Science. And so that is a program that many of the teachers had sort of been dabbling with anyway. And it organizes through that same phenomenon-based approach. And then provides all of the materials. There are videos that are online. There are resources that are all online. It's relatively inexpensive. It's quite accessible to the teachers, and the students really like it. So in seeing that, the teachers said, yes, this is the direction that we'd like to go. Since that was the direction that they wanted to go, and we're looking at a K-5 program, then we wrote the curriculum using the Mystery Science topical framework. And so that's why when you look in, you print the overview, but you'll see all those questions, and then you'll see the standards are all covered. Each student each year is going to focus one unit on each of those three strands, the life science, the physical science, the earth and space science. They kind of cycle through. And that is the organizing structure. The program, we piloted it this year. It's not very expensive. We buy a subscription to the online resources. We buy kits for each of the classrooms, but those kits are not something that you need to replace every year. So the thinking was this was really a good on-ramp for our students and for our teachers with science, but that we weren't so deep into it. If at some point in the future we chose to go with other resources, we wouldn't have made a huge financial investment like we often do, when we're talking about a whole textbook package.
What is what's the actual rate in the kits of consumables? We get a kit. How long will that kit
So we don't
have?
know, because this year was not a good test case because, not all the students were here and so forth. But what we're looking at is, so some of the things that are in the kits are, there's paper, there's sugar cubes, there's, so some of it,
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be terribly expensive, but we have a list of what those items that will need to be replaced are. And that'll be something that the elementary school will be budgeting for on an annual basis of a kit replenishment. John?
A couple questions, and they're kind of tied together. You have multiple classes in a grade, say.
Mhm.
How do we know that the kids are going to learn this, and this, and then carry it over to the following year? In other words, are we gonna have some way to follow up or know that this classroom covered this and then?
That is a question for every single subject in every single grade all across. How do we know? I think there are a couple things. One is that when teachers are able to have curriculum and to have resources that they are using in common, then they are able to have meetings to talk about what are we doing and how is it going. And I think one of the things that sometimes when teachers are kind of off doing their own thing, it doesn't allow for that, because all you say is you're doing, oh, well, I don't know, I do this, and then you can't talk about student work, you can't talk about what things worked, you can't be reflective about what it was that you did or what you would change going forward. So I think this does provide an opportunity.
We'll still have a little flexibility for, like, I called it in my question, local tweaking, meaning you got a topic maybe here in Winslow that's different than someone who wrote this thing that's living in Michigan.
Right.
You know,
And also, each grade level can decide, so it doesn't matter which strand they decide to do first. So it's organized on your calendar, just in order to put it down on paper. But among the team, they can say, well, let's do this one because it makes sense because we can go outside when we're doing that one, and let's do this. But they will decide that in common. So I think, we always are trying to strike a balance between teacher individuality. There's a lot of resources there for teachers, so everybody will not necessarily do everything exactly the same way, but it is going to provide a consistent backbone, which has been missing. And I think the high school teachers and the junior high teachers are thrilled to finally feel as though they've got something that really can be built upon.
And one year will build on the others.
That's right.
It kind of looks like it has a lot of topics there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, just going, since I've been at this a long time, I mean, I know in the past, our curriculum in the past sometimes were teachers that were teaching the same subject at the same class grade level weren't delivering the same.
Right.
It's not that they weren't delivering the same curriculum, but their topics were so entirely different when they got to other grade levels that was a problem, because the teacher in that classroom is like, okay, well, you've had this, but you didn't. And
yeah, we always use the example of the oceans unit where, Peter would always give that example of, we're both teaching oceans, but you decide you're doing beach and I'm doing tides and you're doing, squid and
I'm doing
it's all
the Arctic Ocean.
Right. So this is some commonality. I think the other thing too, normally in our writing of curriculum, we put in the standards that are associated with it, and we put in what it is that we want kids to be able to do with this, not just to know, but what is it that we want them to be able to do with this. But the content part on this one was a little more detailed, and that was actually a little intentional, because since teachers have not been teaching this document could provide them with a quick, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about this animal unit. We're not talking about some other thing. These are the essential understandings that we want students to have, regardless of whether you do that activity or whether you don't. But that is why that is outlined there. Not all of our teachers have, they're generalists. They've got to be experts or pretty good experts at so many different things. And especially when you're now moving them off the thing that they might have been comfortable with in science and providing them with new topics, we're trying to provide them with as many resources as possible. I can guarantee you it is a special area of interest for Michelle. So I think she'll be able to kind of really support the teachers as they come back and really work on implementing this full scale. And I know that Erica has done a good job of carving out some time in the schedule. That's always the challenge at the elementary level, is finding enough time in the day to do this. That's a commitment that they have at that building. So
I have a curriculum question that's not related to this.
Okay.
The state just passed legislation for social studies for the inclusion of Holocaust and African American. How is that going to be? Are you aware of how that's going to be?
I'm not aware of how it will, because we always wait to see what the rules actually comes up to. But social studies at the K to 5 is, is something that needs to be tackled next.
Oh, God, yes.
And that's going to be a little bit more challenging, to be honest with you, not just because of all of what goes on about social studies and politics and all of that, but also because there's so much leeway in the standards that negotiating what that looks like and developing a common scope and sequence across the grades, it'll be a challenge. It will be a challenge.
Yeah, I would love something like this for social
Right.
studies. It would be.
And I think, it was interesting. The teachers were, I think, they were really great about saying, this is what we'll do, this is what we'll do. We'll learn it, and this is what we'll do. So I think it's been a very, I don't know, you've seen it in action.
Yeah, I think they love the program so far. Obviously, this year was not like the typical year, but they are very invested in it at this point. It's super engaging. I actually taught it before I came here. It's very engaging for the students, I think, in terms of ease for instruction for teachers. It provides enough information and resources up front to help the teacher. And I think as teachers get more familiar, obviously, as Mary said, sometimes this is a shift from what they might have taught. It allows them to become experts in these new areas and also gather other resources from the library and other things to reinforce and support the units of study that they're doing. But it's great.
So there is no national social studies agreement in terms of the scope and sequence. And if you look at, things like textbooks and programs like that, there's a lot of variability. So that is something that, it's critical, needed. Just, it's another, and that'll be the work of next year.
Yeah.
Jen?
I know in kindergarten, it's hard to get beyond literacy, numeracy, and executive functioning. But am I reading this correctly that there's only 3 weeks of science in kindergarten?
No, we don't have a calendar built there yet. So that's something that once they can mark out what that's going to look like across the year.
Okay, because across grades 1 through 5, it looks like you have
Yeah,
a number of
yeah.
weeks for each topic, and in
no.
kindergarten, they're just
No,
1 week.
No, and those are the things that they'll start, once they're back together, they'll say, okay, when are we gonna do this? How long are we gonna budget for it? In many instances too, and this is gonna be, they might have a little more breathing space right now. In many cases at the elementary school, you go back and forth between science and social studies, or it's sort of, you don't do all of it in a day. So that could be something then that they start plugging in, what are our social studies units?
Okay, I found that confusing.
Yeah.
Social studies get short shrift in elementary.
Yes. Well,
Absolutely.
yeah, you mentioned national standard, I can't imagine what that would look like for social studies, so that could be a little concerning, but I mean, I think those of us who have been a long time since we've been dealing with the elementary school level children,
This is awesome.
we forget that at the elementary level, it is much more of a generalist approach to get general topics out there and scientific thought and that sort of thing at a very appropriate level that sometimes we get thinking a little too specific, the specialist at the high school level that.
Right. Well, and I think in my experience, one of the things that sometimes happens is that when you ask an elementary teacher or even a junior high teacher to focus on a topic, they think about it at a too high a level and don't really see where the entry point is for kids.
The students are gonna help come up with mysteries.
Kids are so excited about it. They really are excited about it.
They will come up with questions
Because it's
themselves.
relatable to them.
And when this has been a while now, but when we started with reworking curriculum in Winslow, we started with some places where, we could gain some traction, move things along. Science at the time, we knew that they were on the horizon and they weren't there, wasn't the time to do it. I think the teachers now, even though there has been some turnover over those years, they have a pretty good sense about what we're talking about when we're talking about curriculum. So even though social studies might be the hardest one to do, they have the experience now, and so I think the readiness is absolutely there for them to be able to.
Well, and
to
you've got a
really
roadmap here.
Create, right,
You've provided a roadmap. Now you have to consensus together
Yep.
on
Yep.
how you're going to do the next topic.
so any other questions?
Motion to accept?
We have a motion to accept.
Second.
K-5 science curriculum. We have a second from John. Any further discussion?
So good for them.
Okay, all in favor of approving the K-5 science curriculum? It's unanimous. Very good.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mary.
I want to go back to school. I know, I might learn something.
Pay attention this time.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably do better the second time around.
I think I would too.
We all would.
I'd have more fun for sure.
All right, so, next up is vote of appointments. This is the President Peter talking about this.
So you have before you vote on appointments, Thomas Harrison, Assistant Principal, Winslow Elementary School, for the 2-year position. This is all part of the return to school plan that we discussed the last time that we talked. This would be a position that would assist with the transitioning back to school at the elementary school, in addition to understanding that we now have an additional grade. We're coming back from COVID. We have a lot of pieces that we're concerned with in order to ensure a smooth transition. I want the building administrators to focus on being the educational leaders of the building. You've heard that we have a new literacy specialist. We have a math specialist that was not entirely used as a math specialist this past year because we needed to make do and use that person as a utility player. So we have a lot going on in that building, and we feel that some additional help on the assistant side would be of great value. Erica has designed, I'm not sure if she met with Kyle to do this, but looked at the position and looked at what the looked at what the 2 positions would entail, who would focus on which grade levels, who would focus on what particular areas, whether they be attending IEPs or helping with certain administrative tasks. So that has all been laid out. You have before you, it's actually under vote of appointments, and that's just because I want to be completely transparent about this. This is actually a transfer. And so here's, technically, I just need to talk about this in my report like I do with other transfers, but I want to be transparent and put it out there. You have a policy, recruiting and hiring of administrative staff. That policy is GCFB. And it has the typical language with hiring people that you need to post internally first, and then you need to post externally if you don't find a suitable candidate. All of the regular pieces that you have in regular policy for hiring. However, in this particular policy, because it is an administrative hiring of administrative staff, on the last page of this policy, there's a section called hiring of current employees, and that's K. And it said the school unit may forego one or more of the steps set forth in sections B through E, the whole thing, except for the posting, which we've done, of this procedure, and appoint a person who is currently employed by the unit to fill an administrative position only if the superintendent, after consultation with the school board, after consultation with the school board or the school board, and it says a superintendent search, we're not talking about a superintendent in this case, determines that the following circumstances exist. The currently employed candidate is exceptionally well qualified for the position, and the decision to forego all or part of the recruitment and screening processes will not detract from the goals of this policy. I can tell you that based on our knowledge of the candidate has been with us for 5 years. Jason Briggs is not here today to speak of his qualifications, but he would speak very highly of this individual. This individual has worked at the elementary school before. This individual is seeking to be in an administrative role. This is a really good opportunity for this individual to see if this is something that this individual would like to pursue. This individual had also applied for another position that we had, so some of you know of this person, but we don't really want to discuss any of that. But I think your comments would be favorable, I think. So this is what we have, and this individual knows that this is a 2-year position with no guarantees at the end of 2 years.
I'd like to enthusiastically, not approve this, even if we don't have to vote for it.
Okay.
Second?
Yeah,
Do we have a
absolutely,
second?
absolutely.
Okay. Well, we do have to approve the superintendent's consultation, so I guess no reason not to vote on this, obviously. So, yeah, I mean, everything I've heard, it sounds great, so it sounds very good to me. There's no other discussion. All in favor? It is unanimous. So obviously, he's currently employed with us in another position, so obviously his position will be advertised and amongst the others.
In fairness to him, I've had a conversation with him, and I've again reviewed all of this. And again, he would be very thrilled and excited to have this opportunity. He is going to, he will send in his resignation after hearing how the board reacted this evening, and we will move forward. That means Jason will be looking for another science instructor.
So we'll need 2 science instructors.
So given the next thing on the agenda is resignations with Sarah Hardy, grade 8 science. She has done very well for the students here in Winslow over years. She's taken a sabbatical at one point, but brought back lots of useful education to our students in that time. Definitely a teacher that we have enjoyed having. So, but we thank her for her time with Winslow and wish her well in the future. Other business. Do we have other business? And I guess for John's point, anybody that was online that would like to phone in for a public comment, please do so. Now is the time. I see Michelle is online now. Michelle, you weren't around for administrative reports. Did you have anything to add to the meeting?
No, not specifically. I was just checking in to see if everything was okay with the mystery science or if there were any questions about that.
We approved it. It's all good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Good work. I do have the names. I did get those Hannah sent me for the Winslow grads for the adult ed program.
Okay.
Elizabeth Kraus, Zachary Welch, Terry Lynn Wentworth, and Michael Columbia were the 4 that received their diplomas last week.
Very good. Nice to see people continuing their education.
Absolutely.
Okay. There's no other business?
There's no other business. I just want to make a comment. And my comment is to this lady that's sitting over here next to me. The end of the year is always a tough time because you're exhausted. Emotions run high, and it doesn't take much sometimes to crack you, so to speak. And when I was thanking people at the end of the year, obviously I knew Mary was going to be a tough one to thank. She was. She's sitting up there in the stands, and there's another one of those moments that we've had over the last 30 years where no words are necessary. We just look at each other, and we both knew what it was that we were saying. And so, again, I would just like to say publicly, in this board meeting, for her last meeting with us, although she will be with us next year, still working with us in the area of ESSER funds. But this is the last evening where she's with us working in all areas. And I want to make sure that we understand how thankful I am personally, and I think how thankful everybody, this board is, I know this board is as well, Mary, for what you've done. And as I said, in my football analogy, what made you roll your eyes one more time, that you've guided us down the field on so many fronts, and you've left your mark. Yes, you may.
38 years ago, I was a 12-year-old student. Family was going through a tough time. Family was breaking up, and school wasn't a great part of my life at that time. But I had a teacher named Mary Boyle, who was a teacher that made a difference in my life. She never knew it because kids generally don't go back and tell their stuff. And I was privileged, 38 years later, to be able to share time with her again. I wish you the best. You're one of the best teachers. And you don't get up to people because people don't generally tell people, but thank you.
That's cool.
Just a couple things, and I'm going to, as Peter did. I have really enjoyed my time working with Winslow teachers, Winslow administrators. It really has been a pleasure. It has really been a highlight of my career. I appreciate it. I'm really a little envious that Michelle is going to be able to focus on Winslow, and I think she's going to do a terrific job. The thing is that I don't think most of us tell Peter how much we appreciate what he's done. And he's so good at telling all of us that. And I think I don't have very many regrets, but it's one of them that I haven't said as often or as publicly how much I'm grateful for his leadership, for his friendship. And I think Joel really said it in his email message to staff to say, let's recognize him. I think Peter is a treasure. I think Winslow is positioned, I've said this repeatedly lately, but really positioned well. The staff is in a great place. It's steady. All oars are in the water, pulling in the same direction. And I think you've got someone here who really is a singular leader. And I appreciate it. And I think you do too.
Yes, I do.
And I said to Chad, I said, you know, we've heard about typhoid, Mary, and I said, I hope I don't come to be called COVID. The next few years. Sorry, I just couldn't leave us crying or weeping.
That's awesome.
And thank you all. I'll miss you, but I know where to find you all on the stream. Operator News, right?
Third Monday of every month.
And plus these are recorded, right? So you can go
That's
watch
right.
them
I can watch them
in
both
reruns
sides.
all you want.
Oh, no, I
Well,
just thought
did-
of a bad
I
joke
did
I'd
say
tell
that
it.
it's
It's
been
gonna be
like
recorded.
you binge watch something and then all of a sudden it's over and you kind of wonder what happens to these people. But now that I'm going to be doing the COVID, I said it's kind of like I'm the 30-year-old who has his parents' Netflix password. Just sneak in on you all. But it's been a joy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. It has been wonderful working with you. We'll be seeing you around, I'm
You
sure.
will, I'm sure. But probably not on Monday night.
We'll have something more exciting to do.
Tonight's my anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah.
Close it up quick.
Well, congratulations to you and Jerry.
Thanks.
Well, thank you after that nice note.
August
Great to go out
16th.
with such a positive. And we have no phone calls, so public meeting. So our next meeting is August 16th, 2021, 6 o'clock, right here And we'll have the virtual available, and that's what it is right now. Who knows what it'll be in 2 months, but thank you all for a successful school year. Have a great summer. And I know there's plenty of work to do this summer. No rest for the weary, but rest up a little bit there and recharge. And I know you'll come back raring to go with some sense of normalcy in the fall, because that'll be such a relief compared to where you've been this past year and a quarter or so. So appreciate all that you do. And Mary says we don't say it often enough sometimes, and everybody's done a great job. Right there too. So,
Pat on the back.
Motion to adjourn?
very good. Motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Jay. All in favor of adjournment? It's unanimous. Thank you all.